Hi everyone, it's Movement Art and Soul with Karen Sparks. This channel is about wholeness or integration, personal spiritual synthesis, enlightenment, etc. I'm a counselor, artist, and a movement artist, and today we're going to talk more about managing emotions, and this is video number 3 in the series. As I mentioned before, listening to these videos more than once if you have missed things, or you're new to this, or you're looking to go deeper into something in your life which is causing you some emotional upheaval. And so it's always great to have a reminder about these things. And once we can pinpoint what it is that we're doing, as I always say, we have more of an opportunity then to make a change. So just a few points for a recap from video 2, which I think are important. The first one being that our emotions are motions, energies in motion within our energetic field and then dancing down into the physical. So our emotions are meant to be energies in motion. In other words, they're meant to be fluid and flowing through us as we have the various experiences that we do in our life. And I saw someone wearing a shirt one day, and this was in a yoga studio, and it was a very young yoga teacher. And if you happen to be very young and you happen to be a yoga teacher, this is a point to really consider. It's just a point about perhaps being young and inexperienced. The teacher had a shirt on that said "No bad day." So here we may have a point of argument here. If you are a person who believes, let's say, there's no such thing as a bad day, well, then you might disagree with what I'm about to say, because I'm going to say that we do have bad days. If somebody's just been attacked or severely abused or something horrible happened, to them, that's not a great day. That's not going to be on the list of my great enlightened day, my great day, a wonderful day. It can still be, a day, but if we have something that shocks our system, it's not a great day because it may then affect us emotionally. And so I think it's really important not to label people and say, well, God, can't you get over that? Or, oh, you're just being so negative. Or, oh, there's no bad day. Just change your vibe. Just think positively. So again, where I've come from is a place of more balance in my understanding and approach to it. And this is just how I approach it. And it feels very balanced to me. And that is that bad things, because there's also the idea, there's no such thing as a bad thing, because this bad thing happened and then down the road it taught you this and you grew and you developed. I get all that. I'm talking about the way that our body, our energy body, and our physical body and our emotions feel when we are in a traumatic situation, have had an accident, have had some bad news, and somebody, let's say, passed away or something along the lines of leading to us feeling like we're having a really bad day mentally, emotionally, physically. So that is the perspective that I come from, and I would suggest not wearing a shirt like that, particularly if you are a leader somewhere, because I know working with people very deeply, and I know this girl doesn't work in the field that I do, or maybe hasn't even seen half the things that I've seen. And sometimes people are having a really bad day. The best thing you can do is just be there for them and listen and say, I'm so sorry that sounds like it's really challenging for you in this moment. And the best thing you can do is just to acknowledge what they're feeling. So to say no bad day is actually discounting a person who could be in trauma or just something's being worked through their system. All right, so moving on from that, I want to piggyback off that idea. And that is that I say that, let's say a situation does happen. Now, it could be a physical car accident. Well, an accident can affect our emotional state. It can also affect our mental state. And so mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, we've heard this before. Body, mind, spirit, everything's all interrelated. It all affects each other. And in fact, yes, that's very true. So for example, if I have an accident and I'm in pain, then perhaps if I get thrown out of balance because I'm thinking and I'm focusing so much on it, and then emotionally I might be out of balance emotionally. I could have an emotional outburst. I can start thinking negatively. Am I ever going to heal? Or, now I can't do this and I can't do that. So that can be from, let's say, the initial incident of something physical. Now, if you want to talk about it on an energetic level, why did the accident occur in the first place? I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking just strictly on the physical plane, how most of us deal with physical and different kinds of patterns and how that can affect us. So let's look at it the other way around. If I'm experiencing something that is very emotional, so when I'm talking about these things again, I'm talking generally speaking, because if I wanted to then, which I can do a playlist on a more spiritual level, because this channel does talk about spiritual and personal synthesis, enlightenment, and so on. But in these Managing Emotions series, this is very practical, day-to-day general ideas about how most of us get stuck emotionally at different times in our lives. So it's a very practical series, okay? That's the way I want you to think about with this particular series. So let's say there's an emotional reaction to something. That emotional reaction can impact us spiritually. So on another level of our being, that we can feel impacted, and we can begin to think negatively. And then if our emotions and our mental patterns are stuck in a certain way that is not harmonious or balanced, our physical body can become tense, and then we can develop various different physical disharmonies. Our breath can get constricted, and so on, and you can see how this can spiral. So that's very true. If I'm thinking negatively, let's say something does occur, I'm in a situation and I begin to have negative thinking patterns that can affect me emotionally. I'm not going to feel very good when I have a pattern mentally that's going on, and then I might start to feel emotionally unbalanced, and then that can affect me spiritually and physically. And so these things are very deeply interrelated. And what we know from various healing arts like Kung Fu, Qigong, acupressure, Jinshin Jutsu, yoga, different things like that, is that everything can affect us in various ways. So we are multi-level, multi-dimensional, multi-level type beings, and it's very easy for us to get out of balance and to get affected. So I'm just going to do a little reminder here about this next slide, and it is about what I taught you in the last video about holding your fingers. So the various emotional patterns that can hook us. If you look at the thumb, worry, and then the index finger, fear, the middle finger, anger. Are you surprised? What do people flip when they get really mad, right? And then the ring finger, grief, and pretense and trying to, or the pinky. And as I said, I will be talking more about why holding those fingers helps in a healing series that I can do at another time. So what I wanted to talk about next is basically looking at emotional patterns that can also come about that we can look at and identify. Things that can hook us. So when I talk about, for example, these various attitudes in Jinshin Jutsu, where the fingers were on the slide, they call them attitudes, and they say that these attitudes will definitely impact us on various levels. So as I said to you, we are interrelated. And we can have different types of patterns that create attitudes. So for example, if someone is under the effect of a distorted perception, so if I'm not seeing something clearly, I can eventually react to that. And I can have an attitude about it, or an emotion. We can call it an emotion or an attitude, whichever you like. And so if something happens and I'm just seeing it in a distorted way, and this goes back to the first video where I showed you a slide where there's distortion in the water and we can't see our true reflection. So if we have some sort of distorted perception and we can't see the true reflection, we won't see ourselves clearly. We may even feel justified. So a distorted perception can lead to attitudes. And so if I'm feeling worry, then what I'm suggesting to you is once I can realize it, because that's really a really big key. Can I have the awareness to realize that I'm caught up in a pattern of worrying? You know, my dad was a really fabulous worrier, and I felt so bad for him because he would just get himself all worked up. And, you know, when you think about the things that we worry about, generally speaking, to come to see that we worry is really important. And I tried to give him that reflection so he could at least identify, oh, I'm worried, and not project that out. So, and it would make him sick on the inside as well. So some of these things are actually, in fact, distorted. Some of the things that he worried about and expressed to me were not really clear reflections. They were his own fears and concerns blown out of proportion due to his just incessant thinking about something, because he was worried and it would lead to fear, and then the fear would lead to other attitudes, and so on. So our distorted perceptions lead to these attitudes, and the awareness is so key. Can I be aware that I am feeling this? You might say, well, really, aren't you aware of what you're feeling? Well, awareness is one of the big, huge things for emotional patterns. Can I hold my thumb to assist myself if I don't even realize that I'm feeling worried? A young man that I was teaching once, he was having some kind of issue. I knew there was something going on in his personal life, and he was having a couple of outbursts in class. I pulled him over to the side, and he came into my office, and we started talking. And I said to him, you know, I can tell that you're very angry. And he pounded his fists on the desk and said, I'm not angry, in a very angry voice. And I just calmly looked at him and said, well, what would you call that? So he left in a big huff, but he called me later and said, oh, you know what? You're right. And there were things that I had to address. And he said, I'm so sorry. He said, I just didn't even realize how stuck I was in anger. I just didn't realize that. And he apologized. And I said, you know, you need to look at what is going on in your life. He said, I know exactly what's going on. And he said, I'm going to go deal with that. And so I think that's important. So we can't deal with a situation until we can own it, until we can say, yeah, I'm feeling that. You know, because one thing that we're really great at in our society is not wanting to feel, you know, hence whatever I can take to numb that feeling, whatever I can do to numb that feeling. This is why we will talk a little bit about addictions a little bit later in this video, but this is where it stems from, is I don't want to feel these things, right? But we are human beings, and we can allow these things to flow through us if we can learn to work with this on different levels and become more balanced in a holistic way. So yeah, we need to look at, what am I eating? We talked about that. Create a routine for yourself. What am I eating? What am I drinking? How do I feed myself? How do I nourish myself? You know, what are all these things that I can do for myself, and see how I can get balanced through looking at those things first before I want to rush over and take something, whether it's alcohol or a drug or other kind of addiction. We'll talk about that. So the distorted perceptions, yeah. And if I can't see what I'm feeling, then I can't hold my index finger or whatever other tool. I talk about that because that's like a physical thing that you can do. But whatever other tool, if I don't realize I'm angry, I might not look at that as a pattern, or I might feel justified. So let's take that one little step further and just distinguish between different kinds of feelings. What if it's not a distorted perception? What if somebody is abusing me and I feel angry, but I've been taught and conditioned to be quiet, that my feelings don't count, that it doesn't matter what I'm feeling, that I better not talk about feeling angry, or I better not show anger in any way, shape, or form. So I may be conditioned, or, you know, that a nice person, or it could be religious too, but it's distorted. It's a distorted belief. It's not really accurate that you're not supposed to feel angry. Where the real teaching is what if I'm feeling angry, I let that to course through me. I'm aware of it. I identify it. I'm feeling angry. Now, what do I need to do? How am I going to express that anger? How am I going to deal with it? How am I going to cope with it? In what form does it come out? So we're more afraid of the aggressive side of it, and that's quite valid. But there's many different ways to deal with anger, and anger can be quite justified. This person's abused me. This happened to me. The situation, whatever it might be. So there is justifiable anger, right? and other feelings. So we're either in a distorted perception or we're in a feeling that when people come and talk to me, I'm not one of those people that says, just positive vibes all the time. No, because sometimes we just go, you know what? Yeah, that really wasn't great, was it? That experience you had? Yeah, I get that. That's tough. That's tough. I'll give you a personal example. Sadness, and let's talk about sadness and grief. So if I'm feeling grief over something, maybe I'm crying because I didn't get my way. Maybe I'm crying because in my distorted perception, somebody should be treating me a certain way that I expect and they don't. Well, that's an example of a distorted perception. For example, it could come in any form if it's distorted. But what if it's real? My example that I was going to give you is that I had several family members die within, which to me felt like a very short period of time. And then my best and first dog, who, he was like a therapy dog. Everywhere I went, people just loved that dog. And he was really special. So to me, he was family too. So within a very short period of time, there was all this death. And then some other things happened as well. So I began to feel grief, and I began to just feel overwhelmed with it because it was so much. It was like I didn't have a chance to channel it through, and it was very difficult. So that affected me, and it was valid. There were so many things beyond my control. I could not do anything about it, and I had to just feel it and go through it. Let it go through the body, do things for my body, help my body. Talk about that and let go. And the letting go, particularly around certain things that I experienced, was tough for me. So that's a good, useful thing to know. What is challenging for you? What types of things are challenging? Okay, so those are the two things. We either have something that is a genuine feeling. We are emotional beings. We are emotional beings. These emotions arise. And so I'm going to be showing you a slide that talks about how our emotions can become calmer and more balanced, and not that we're not going to feel things. We'll talk about that. So another emotional pattern is emotional unavailability. I'm going to be doing a series, as I have mentioned before, about narcissism. So, for example, it is a very common thing that people talk about, that, let's say, a narcissist tends to be emotionally unavailable because what most of the things that they're doing is considering themselves first. Not that we shouldn't. So here is about a balance point too. Let's say I'm a mother and I have a newborn baby. I need to think about myself first. I would tell mothers this. They would come to me depressed and tired and worn out, and I say, you need to look after yourself first so you have more to give your baby. So I'm not talking about self-serving, selfish things that are actually self-care. Self-care, thinking of yourself first, very important. So we get these things confused sometimes. And then in one time in my life, I did as well. When I was younger, like self-care, I cared more about looking after the needs of others than I did for myself. So that was a pattern I had to look at. And so when we take a look at emotional unavailability in a situation, for example, of narcissism, they do tend to think of themselves first. And so that kind of thinking of yourself first, I'm talking about something different. I'm talking where the kind of person is just not there emotionally when you are in a situation, let's say, where you do need support and they're a very close person to you. They could be emotionally unavailable. And so that is just another form of avoidance that we have a lot of in our culture, but it's an extreme form of not being able to be in touch with the feelings, bearing them, repressing them, denying them, and doing a host of other things that aren't very healthy for the person either, because I wish I knew who said this. Somebody once said, when I was studying a healing modality, our organs will weep the tears our eyes refuse to shed. And that was really powerful for me because, we hear so much about don't do this and don't do that and don't cry and don't all these different things, when actually, if you were to be able to, as we spoke about before, feeling your feelings and just allowing them to flow through. So hearing about grief and crying and just allowing it to flow through your body, it'll stop, and the emotion and the energies will channel out. And actually, your tears are a release. So you can see, for example, that there are people who are emotionally unavailable, and they might not even be able to tell you the last time they cried. And maybe some sad things have happened to them. And so therefore they didn't really fully feel that. Maybe not. So that's another pattern. And so the key from today to take from what all these different things that I'm telling you about, I've looked at myself and identified different patterns that I've had, and how emotions are held, and what different things were going on inside my body, my mind, and my emotions and my spirit, and so on, and how does that manifest in my life. So I do encourage you to do that, because I can tell you that it's made a big difference in my life. So what I want to talk about next is, I want you to take a look at this next picture here. We're going to talk a little bit about addictions. How does that come into play with emotional patterns? Well, I did mention very quickly that our society in general, and we're identifying and coming, I think, to a point where we're talking about these things more than we used to, but I'm still seeing avoidance patterns quite predominant, and addictions quite predominant in our society, and as a counselor and teacher. So I can see it's still a really big issue. So let's take a look at this slide. You see the highs and the lows, the spikes, way up and way down. You see a baseline, just a straight horizontal line. And you see another line that hugs closer to the horizontal line. And that's the line of calm and flow, meaning we will feel things. We will feel things. So it's not about going to baseline, staying flat, because we're emotional creatures, and we are meant to feel things. And some things hurt. The difference between what happens with us emotionally when we're addicted is that these emotions will spike very high and very low. And so when we go down into a low is when we're starting to now think about the addictive substance, whatever the addiction is. And I had a big wake-up call when I was studying these things when I was a lot younger, coming to the awareness of realizing how many things are addictions. So, we many times, most people think, oh, well, alcohol and drugs and vaping or cigarettes or whatever, but there's sex addictions, there's pornography addictions, there's sports addictions, there's mental pattern addictions. There are, these days, the tech, the gaming. So really, what is an addiction then? An addiction is anything that can cause us to spike high and low, cause us to, interrupt our life with the thing that we're addicted to. So therefore, it's getting in the way of the potential of who we really have the capacity to be. What is our potential as a human being? When we're addicted, the substance or the thing or the whatever it is that we're using to not feel and to cope and to deal with things is actually preventing us from living a fuller life. And I do have a lot of empathy and compassion, because to get to an addictive place, it's really showing that things happened that were overwhelming to the person they don't want to feel. And from the modalities that I looked into, particularly the modality in counseling of psychosynthesis, and other modalities talk about this as well. I learned about it in Gestalt and shamanism and so on. In psychosynthesis, we looked at developmental theory as well, and looking at how from being a child, we learn about the societal group, cultural, social, all these different roles and all these different ways of being in the world from being very young. We do have a personality, sure. We do have a personality traits of our own, and that has a part in making us individual. And our experiences are very important. So oftentimes what leads people to addiction is a series of experiences through life that end up making them feel that they can't be who they are. So that part gets hidden, it gets buried, it gets repressed, and a whole host of other things start to show up, like, what do I need to behave like in order to fit in? Well, everybody's partying around me, or everybody's vaping, or everybody's doing, I don't know. Or sometimes people fall into some kind of an addictive pattern with something accidentally in a time when they're not feeling great, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I liked that. Oh, I felt good after that. Oh, I need to do that again. That felt great. So it's almost like a feeling of wanting to feel good again, wanting to be yourself, wanting to just feel great. And in the psychosynthesis model, it's even suggested wanting to connect to something higher than myself that makes me feel really good and connected. So most of the time, addictions have to do with not feeling really great, not feeling really connected with who we are and our place in the world and what gives us meaning and purpose. So that's something to look at. So our emotional patterns can lead to addictions, and very often, like I said, it really hooks in pretty early into teenage years. So that's a sad part. Okay, so what can we do? What's the point of all this? The point of all this is to get us to see, to get us to reflect, to look at what's distorted, to face whatever it is we need to look at, and to get the support and the guidance that we may want or need in order to move forward. And so I hope that this brings you some clarity and some understanding. And if we look at the next slide, remember again to find something that makes you feel good in a healthy way. Look at your diet, look at your thoughts, look at what you're eating, you're drinking, the circles that you're in, look at your environment. Do you have support? Do you have things that bring you meaning? Who are you? Where were you headed before you started to feel the way you feel? Where were you headed? What gave you a sense of meaning? And if you say to me, blank, well, many people have that answer for me, but I've also gotten people that said, I don't know. And I say, okay, well, you can find that now. You can find what things give you meaning, what makes you feel good that's healthy. And just like this picture, one of the biggest things I encourage people to do is get out, because in nature, you get so much more oxygen in the woods. You get better air than being stuck in your house. And do you even open up your windows and get fresh air when you can? Get some fresh air, get outside, get into the sun. It's so healthy for us. And find a special place. Do you have any pets? Breathing, right? I talk about breathing a lot. Breathing can channel emotions. Breathing assists us to get to the present moment. And that's what we need to do. And part of my training involved, it's like a threefold path in Kung Fu. So it's the path of the warrioress, the natural healer, and the spiritual guide or priestess. Whichever words you like. But so sometimes we need to learn to be a warrior or a warrioress in our own life. We need to take a look at things. We need to be brave. We need to be strong, develop inner strength and fortitude to face the things that we need to face. And there is absolutely no reason why we can't find the support to do that, because it is out there. And don't give up. People have told me that. I'm finding it hard to find someone. Well, I understand that. But you can find support. You can find a group. You can find a course. You can find a great book. You can find a teacher. You can find a counselor. One counselor doesn't work for you. Find someone that is really more along the lines of what you feel is supportive or what you feel you need at the time. Talk to different people, what works for them. And take a look at your emotional patterns. So that's going to be it for now. And as I said, this was just really a beginning look at emotions in this series. And so I'm going to be moving on to a different playlist. So this is really, I would say, an introductory dip into managing emotions. And as I talk about other things, you can always come back to this, because without the self-reflection first, remember, our emotions are like water. They're meant to flow through our body. And it is often the emotional patterns that we have that prevent us in some way from moving forward. As we go through into other playlists, I will also probably talk about emotions in relation to mental patterns or different things like that, movement or whatever. But again, these three talks that I gave have a lot of questions and just considerations to take a look at.